So this is scene 3, and I've taken a few liberties here. Now, looking at this, can you detect what's wrong? Probably not, which is a good thing. So I've got this sun here, and it's apparently casting light onto the side here. But what's actually happening is that the distant light source associated with the light object that's part of this sun assembly is actually casting light from around here to get that edge lit up as much as it is. And I'll show you this. Okay, so it's selected at the moment, so I'm just going to deselect it because otherwise it's going to get in the way. Where's my deselect? Select none. Okay, the sun, I've already used Control and Alt and double clicked on that ball so that I can now hold Control and Alt and position the sun right where that distant light source is. There. That's more or less it. So if we look at the settings here, we've got 43 and essentially 57. The sunlight is disabled, by the way. The greenish light here is arriving from a radial light source on the left hand side. So the sun I'm only using as a pointer to try and establish where the position of things is. So if I look at this distant light source now, so I'll select that, so hold the Control key down and select the sunlight distant light source and edit it. You can see its azimuth and altitude don't match the sun positions, which is positioned behind it. So this is a bit of cheating. If I was to use the sun positions, which I've subsequently forgotten, but let's try again, 43, 57, if I was to use those positions for this distant light, 43, 57, what you would find is that it's not really lighting the edge of that asteroid up tremendously well. You can see it's rather ill-defined, hence the cheating. Control Z should take me back to my original setting. No, it's not, but you get that sometimes with features that have been added since, so I can just move that round. I'll just guess that'll do. So what, it's not really gone that far around, but what I was aiming to do, what I thought I could do, is take this light source and put it on the very edge of the asteroid and give the effect that it's just like peeking round. So if I select everything that's in family that's orange and move it to the edge of the asteroid here, you can see we've got this glow. Well, it's apparently behind the asteroid. Actually, it looks like it's colliding with it. Let's check that from above. Yeah, it is. So I could probably do with moving that lot back out of the way and expanding it so it's not actually coincident with the geometry there. So the thing is that the glow in space, that's not a real thing. You know, that this is us thinking in terms of atmosphere and light entering the atmosphere. That can only really be in the camera. So what we should do is shift this glow effect forward. So let's select part of the glow effect. We'll leave some in the background. We'll move part of it forward so it's in front of the let's see, we've got camera space select. That's ideal, in front of the asteroid. So I'll just slide it forward. It seems to have gone out of sync a bit, but let's not worry about that too much. You can just reposition it by moving it around. So we've got the glow, and we're going to position it in front of the asteroid and shrink it down a bit so it looks like the light's spilling around it. So this is sort of like light in your eye or light in the camera. And if it was in a camera, copy and paste that glow effect. That's just Control C and Control V. Move it forward so you've not got the two 2D faces stuck together, and then I'm going to squash it. Whoops, I'm in camera space, aren't I? Let's do this in object space. I'm going to squash it and then rotate it around. Let's try some of these rotations, see which suits it so it's horizontal, and then hopefully I can make this look a bit like a lens effect by making it a bit more extreme and stretching it out sideways. I don't know what direction that's going to be, so I'll just guess. There we go. You see, it's handy if you always keep your camera orientated towards north or the Z direction. So this could be like an effect. I'm going to shrink the size of the sun core as well so it makes it quite sharp. So this is my sun and this is my glow effect somewhere here. Just lift it up so it aligns with more or less the center of that sun effect. Not quite aligned yet. Just a bit more. Let's try that. Oh, it's gone above it. Probably I can do this by positioning it with the... Yeah, if it looks right, it is right. That's the rule. So that's created that effect. I'm just trying to get it level because it would be level with the camera or the eye. and then we'll have a look at this spiral galaxy and change that. So this spiral galaxy, which is associated with this enormous sphere that I've wrapped around the camera, is a volumetric material, and it's been modified from what's in the library. So if you modify a material and you want to save it, you can just go and save that into the material lab somewhere, find a space, it doesn't matter where, stick it somewhere safe, and then you can call it up and apply it to an appropriate geometry. Alternatively, you could just add this as an entire object to your object library if you can find a space to put it in. As you can see, I just tend to fill things up randomly, which is terrible. I'm sure Horo would be more organised. So there you go, and then you can call it up again. But what I wanted to show you, and you're probably going to cringe at this, but let's go into the Deep Texture editor and have a look at modifying this galaxy. I'm going to describe to you what I've done here then. So the first channel is creating our spiral effect, and that is done using, let's open up some of these controls here, vortex noise. I'm using 3D vortex noise, and I've just positioned this so there's a vortex just here, and the phase control in this case, and I'll come to the phase later on. The phase control is moving it around in the 3D space that exists, but that's getting a bit complicated, and I'm going to have to cover that later on. So just trust me, at some point you need to move it, and some point you need to fluff it up a bit to create the cloudiness effect. So we've gone for moving in this case, and in which case you will find that we've also been moving, using the sign control, this distant origin. So what you have here is an attempt by me to get things lined up, because this is a distance origin again that I've used the sign to move this around to position it so it lines up with the center of this vortex, because otherwise in its default state distance origin appears here at the origin, which of whatever mapping mode you're using. Oh, this is getting terribly complicated, or so it seems, but if we can deal with one concept at a time, it won't be too bad. So for this stage, I've already touched on these topics, but I'll return to them later, so just bear that in mind. You can move these around in 3D space, although we only get a slice, or we can have a view that gives us a clue at the outside of a 3D cube or on the surface of a sphere. Essentially, this vortex exists in 3D space, and what you need to do is move it around so you can get hold of it and position it where you want it to. This is our spiral galaxy. All this other stuff, this fractal noise, is not very helpful to us, but this is, and that's the bit we're picking out. So it's positioned in here and pushed around with phase until we can get to a stage where we can use the transformation tools to adjust it, and it's so that it actually lines up more or less with the center of the object we're applying it to. So that's the fiddly bit. The thing that we can do quite easily is change the color of it, which is far less painful. So you look at these color swatches, C denotes whether it's supplying color to the channel, and you can change things somewhat radically and look at the results. So this is the core that's getting averaged in. This is part of the cloud function, and this is also part of the cloud function. So depending on what colors you choose for this will result in a colored output. Difficult to predict what without rendering it, so we'll give it a quick render and see how that's changed things. So you can see that the core's adopted quite a bright yellow color, and that's a little bit extreme, so let's take this and tone it down a bit and see what we get. So because it had gone rather extreme, I'm going to take it quite a long way down and see how it looks. So that's changed the colours of the cloud. What else have we got in this material while we're looking at it, but without going into too much depth? There's the galaxy, and here is actually star functions. So again, it's repositioning to match up with the galaxy and then putting the stars in. Multiplication means if you have dark areas and you multiply it, then that'll switch the stars off in that area. And you can see that the stars are also just coloured in this final phase and they're fully white. The initial phases are all to do with setting up the intensity of the stars, and this first component is actually a hypertexture. And the key point about this is when you multiply by hypertexture you get a very high output. So it's high output multiplied by a sphere that lines up with the galaxy. It's been pushed around by this phase function here, and then multiplied by the dots. So the stars come out very bright, which means the filter can be set very low. So what this means is mostly galaxy is coming through and a tiny bit stars. But because the stars are multiplied by a hypertexture, the stars come out very bright even though you're not getting much of the stars through. So we still see the stars, but we're dictated to mostly by the clouds of the galaxy. Another hypertexture is involved here in multiplying the ambient channel to bring this up so it can look like a nice bright object in the sky. So okay, that's quite fiddly. This orange blob could be contributing to the light in the scene, but considering the size of galaxies and the size of asteroids, it would be unlikely that we'd see any lighting on the underside here from the orange blob. If we were to make the entire galaxy an orange colour, then we could change the colour of that green light. So let's look at doing that. So let's steal that orange there, make this an orangey red colour as well, see what effect that has on the final output. Okay, so we've now got an orange galaxy instead of a greenish tinted one. So I'll modify the radial light. If I can find it, it's in here somewhere. Select radial light. Okay, go down into here, edit it, and instead of being that sort of greeny colour, we'll make it an orange colour. So we're pretending that this is being lit by parts of the galaxy. It's a bit too strong, that, so we'll drop that output level so it's just gently lit. And we could move it round if we wanted. Let's see if we use some of these views. Keyboard shortcuts 1, 2, 3 and 4 are very helpful for changing camera views quickly. So I'll just move this around a bit to one side and see what effect that has on my asteroid. I didn't really want it there, so I'll move it back using Ctrl Z and try and position it in a different axis. Could do with it being further forward. One of the problems with making the stars glow is it does mean that you're pointing the camera up to avoid the horizon appearing in your scene, which means that the usual orientation that you're used to dealing with, which is generally the camera almost horizontal, is different. So I find it difficult to position things in the sky. So you just have to bear that in mind. I'm just trying to light the underside of this asteroid, and this is a side view, keyboard shortcut 3. And I'm just positioning this light so it should be clipping this underside edge of the asteroid, which we can see in the view here. I have to think that the OpenGL modes might be more helpful in this case, but then they don't work so well with volumetric materials because they only see those as solid spheres, so that's where it sort of falls down. And I do like using the volumetric materials because they're very efficient and you can scale them up without seeing any pixelization, whereas if you were just applying these with image textures, then you would quickly run out of resolution. So I've made those changes. One last thing I might consider, I know I covered this in another video, but we'll go over it again. If we go into the Skylab and atmosphere, if I change the colour perspective associated with the haze colours, then it will allow me, I don't think I need fog, it will allow me to change the glow colours around the stars. So if I increase this to, say, a red colour here, that might fit in rather nicely with this galaxy. You can see the horizon glows coming in here. It's a bit too strong, I would say, and I've reconsidered and just use Ctrl Z and I should be able to go back a step, maybe twice. Let's try again to the green colour, the blue-green colour, the cool blue-green, which is just appearing slightly down here because that's where the horizon is. Now, okay, let's say I don't want any of this glow at the bottom and I've set my scene up, so what I could do is select all. If you select all, it doesn't select the perspective camera. Difficult to show because I've got massive things in my scene. If I now go attributes, link in, parent name, perspective camera, switch to the perspective view, I can tilt my camera back and that will take the glow out of the bottom because it's just moved everything that's grouped with the camera up in space. So I think that's about it. I've showed you how to create a few effects there. I've gone into some detail with the material and showed you how you two different ways you could save it into the libraries. Bear in mind, later videos we are going to tackle modifying the volumetric materials and look at the phase, and I'll try and remember what I did. Well, I have a pretty good idea what I did, but because I've slept since then, I just tend to forget. Sorry about that. Right, so anyway, that's the end of the video. Hope you found that interesting and not too rambling, and we'll move on to the next scene in due course. Cheers now.